You're listening to the Inland Talk Express, 1050 AM and 106.5 FM, KCAA Loma Linda.
The Business and Sustainability Hour is on the air.
Hi, and good afternoon, and welcome to our show. Hi, and good afternoon, and welcome to our show. This is Daryl Waters. Music is an important part in film and television production. There's a writer's strike going on in Hollywood where that might be something of a challenge to those in the music field as well. Our next guest is a composer for film and television. She's one of a handful of women who have scored both studio and independent features as well as network and cable TV. She is also a record producer and recording artist, and as a recording artist, also known as 60 Channels. She created the electronic pop project 60 Channels in the late 90s, producing 2 albums, an EP, and various singles. 60 Channels played the very first Coachella with featured guest vocalists including Slim Kid Trey of The Pharcyde and Jody Watley at the Empire Polo Fields in Indio, California in 1999. The Angel continues to release records and also owns her entire catalog of master recordings and publishing. You're listening to the Business and Sustainability Hour on KCAA AM 1050. With us today is the Angel. She's a composer for film and television, a record producer, and recording artist. Hi, Angel. We're happy to have you with us.
Hey, Daryl. So nice to be with you.
Thank you, and it's good to have you with us. So, and bringing a little bit more to your introduction, you're a composer, and you've been tapped to score TV by Ava DuVernay, Charles Dutton, and showrunner Glenn Mazzara, as you know, is also known for feature films like the New Line classic, Boiler Room, UK cult hit, Adulthood, and upcoming Paramount feature Heist 88, coming up very soon on Showtime. So would you like to talk about those?
Sure, I can give you a little bit of background on what I've been doing. I've started out as a musician and a record producer, and I've recorded many records over the years, but one thing led to another, and one of my, I think it was a remix that I did for The Pharcyde back in the day that actually caught the ear. Oh, I'm sorry about that. That caught the ear of Vondie Curtis Hall when he was directing. He'd written and directed a film called Gridlocked, and because he really loved what I did from a production standpoint on that, he asked if I would score that film. And so a lot of the second part of my career has been mostly focused on scoring for film and television, and that's where I learned about the politics of what it's like to break into the composing end of things for film and television. It's a whole other thing, and it's not an easy one to break into for anybody. So I learned about the politics of how they credit composers, and if you haven't had a credit before, there's all sorts of different ways in which you can be sidelined in your own project. But in any event, it turned out really well. I wound up really doing additional score on Gridlocked. That was Tupac's last film with Tim Roth. Because at the time the studio said to Vondie, look, we can't hire a first-time composer to score the film. So they actually hired Stuart Copeland of The Police, and he and I wound up taking different parts of the film and each of us scoring different segments of the film. And so I cut my teeth learning that way, and just how it works, basically.
Very nice. So you mentioned how your biggest challenges presented themselves after becoming a film composer. And women in that field of music composition are at a low. Would you like to talk about that?
Well, at the in 2023, women still represent only about 6% of all working composers in film and TV worldwide. There's a lot of reasons behind that, and some of it, really is down to the sort of dirty little secret of the way that many composers have chosen to work in our field, where because they have established themselves, they're able to get hired. However, they will take multiple gigs at the same time and sub out a lot of the work to other composers, sort of, either people on their team or even outside of their own team, so that they can actually bring in as much as they can, as much work as they can, which, is not a great model for, I don't think, for the creatives, but certainly it's a business model for some. It's not the way that I work. I'm very hands-on, very tactile. I really love getting into the trenches with my collaborators, and it's something I really love doing. So for me, it's not commerce; it's art. It's art with big deadlines and lots of stress and
Right.
lots of moving parts and things that have to be managed. But it's a beautiful thing. I love working to picture.
Right. And your start, you talk about your passion for what you're doing and wanting to succeed over money and fame.
Yes, I've never been driven by the money. It's always been about really about working with other great creatives and being able to do something unique and special for each of their projects. I've scored pretty much everything from from studio features to independents, documentaries, as well as network and cable TV. It's a sad state of affairs that not many women can say that. And of course, the statistics are not great. So, we're always working to let people know, let everyone out there know that that this is where it's at for composers, even women composers in particular, to this day. And it kind of ties in a little bit toward the issues that writers are having. Sort of speaks to the same, lack of representation, lack of opportunities, lack of a will, I would say, also from those who do the hiring to step outside of the same 10 names that are on every studio's list, to seek out fresh voices, not only as writers but as composers. So yeah, I think we're kind of in an interesting era, an interesting time, where there's a will to kind of embrace a different way of doing things in our industry. And one of the projects that I've just recently worked on that's out in festivals right now is a project called Confessions. It's a short film, written and directed by Yvette Vargas. And I bring this up because she is not only on the diversity committee of the WGA, but she also has a house on Clubhouse, which is an audio app. And she has built a tremendous community of really progressive industry creatives on this app in a house called New Hollywood. And we talk about these types of things all the time, about what we as creatives can do to make it better for all creatives in entertainment, and to sort of push back against the old Hollywood way of doing things.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a really it's a beautiful thing, actually, that during the pandemic we've been able to do this. And she has a weekly show and interviews writers, directors, producers, every craft has come through, and it's been a really amazing. It's becoming a podcast as well, but it's an incredibly valuable series of interviews with many incredible creatives in our industry that share, the boots on the ground stories from
And
their own experience.
it's a lot of twists and turns to that film that you just mentioned. Um, I've heard about it. And it's just like it's a present day, story that's going on and on about a lot of different things, lots of twists and turns. So I guess it's a bit of a challenge for you as well, as a composer putting music to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a very evocative story, and it's also, it's not just a short film, but it's also a proof of concept for a series. And it's centered on a fallen angel, who has been kicked out of heaven, and he's stuck on earth. And in order to get back up to heaven, he has to do his penance by working with sinners to get them to atone for their sins. And so there is an endless amount of storytelling to be had there, with very interesting and unusual types of sins that have been committed. And so with this particular project, Yvette, who's the director, and I, spoke about tone and what she was hoping I could bring to the table to give it the gravitas that it needs. It's a Latino project centered on a Latino fallen angel, and he is played by actor Carlos Leal, and he's just incredible to watch, and he's brilliant. And it's like all of the projects I work on, each one has its own flavor and its own style and its own tone. And so with this one, I was able to tap into a little bit of, it's a little bit traditional, but it's a hybrid mixture of sounds I've created, and it pulls from old worldy kind of flavors, because he's a 500-year-old angel.
Right.
But it's set in the modern day. So there's also, electronic and interesting sounds that all blend together to create the score and the feeling for the world of Confessions.
So we talked a little bit about your background in the beginning of the show. So your journey began. So was there anything special about you to make it easy to choose your talent for music over someone else? And would you change anything?
The thing that I bring to the table that is very, very different from a lot of other composers is the way that I work, not only with my creatives, but the fact that I also score to picture. I don't just write a bunch of music and then have somebody cut it in, and that is something that not everybody understands how music is put into a film or a TV show, but there are a lot of different ways of working, and different composers work differently from each other. But I work in a very nuanced fashion, very detail-oriented, and work to picture, which is something that I think really sets not just my musical storytelling apart, but it immerses me in the way that the picture is shot. So a lot of it is down to how the DP has shot the film, and what is happening in great detail with the actors. And I have another short film out in festivals right now as well, called The Kill Floor, with writer-director Carlos Avila, who I've worked with on several other projects. And his film is a very different feeling, different vibe from Confessions, Confessions has a bit of a supernatural vibe about it. And The Kill Floor is a very grounded story that takes place during COVID in a rural Latino community in which the meatpacking plant is the biggest employer of everyone in the community, and what a particular father and son have gone through in that time frame. It's a very emotional and beautiful piece, and score is a completely different flavor from Confessions, so it's just each project pulls me into a new world. Each thing that I do, and some of the projects, specifically that I've been asked to score, the directors have asked me to do something very non-traditional. As a record producer, I come from a much more, I come from a down-tempo, beat-driven, evocative kind of world of music,
Right.
more electronic, and so it's sometimes I'm hired specifically to bring those sensibilities to a project where it warrants it.
I
And
love
that's
that.
exactly.
I love the
Yeah,
electronic feel of music. It's just unbelievable. Sometimes you're just lost in it.
right on. It's a whole other thing, and it's fun to be able to bring those sensibilities into projects like, for instance, Kidulthood, which is a British UK feature that became a huge hit, and the director really wanted me to do something similar to the way that I approached the score for Boiler Room, where, again, the director, Ben Younger, for Boiler Room wanted me to do something that was completely non-traditional. Boiler Room is set in a shiesty, oh my goodness, my brain.
I saw a little bit of it. It was
It's
unbelievable.
a
It's like, yeah, I couldn't believe it. You could see that there was a lot going on there.
well, it's a shiesty stock brokerage firm,
Right.
and it's also based off the same real life story of Wolf of Wall Street, but it came along a lot longer ago, and it was very important to the director who had written and directed it that the film feel like it did when he was working in a boiler room. So,
Well, I mean, there are
all
also
the guys.
a lot of big actors there.
Yes, I mean that was everyone from Ben Affleck, Jamie Kennedy, Vin Diesel, Scott Conn. I mean, it was a real who's who of young actors at the time. It was like 2000,
Right.
and the writer director had, as I say, had worked in a boiler room. So he said, "Listen, I want all of the score to blend seamlessly with all the 90s hip hop that I'm putting into the film."
Nice.
And I don't want it to feel completely divorced from that, because that's the world, that's the music we were all listening to when we were actually working in in the boiler room. So that was a really fun project to do because of that, and it means that I could do other creative things. I mean, I brought in horn sections, and it was it really had a whole kind of just a really interesting flavor of its own.
Nice.
And when I came to do Kidulthood, now we're in a completely British setting. The film is aimed at 15-year-olds in the UK, and very street and very and also incredibly credible and real. And so Menaj Huda, who I've now done 5 projects with, this was the very first one I worked on with him, and he said, I really want the score to be as credible and cool as all of the source music that we're putting in there, and it was all UK hip-hop and grime. So that has a very specific flavor of its own as well. So sometimes, with certain projects, that's what I'm hired for, is something that not many other people can do credibly.
Nice.
Because I have a foot in both worlds. I have a foot in the record releasing and also in film and TV composing.
So your developing of your own sound in the face of women in music composition, working with women of color is one of the things that you talk about. And what better place than Los Angeles? Originally from Brooklyn. Well, not originally from Brooklyn. Is it what? Via London, or what happened?
I am originally from Brooklyn. I lived in London for quite a while, and I came to LA from London because I'd signed a record deal with Delicious Vinyl in '93.
Nice.
And, Delicious were having huge success with Tone Loc and Master Ace, and the Far Side were just, starting to really blow up at that point. And so that's what actually brought me to LA. And although I had recorded an album in London, and I came to LA just to start promoting and gigging and doing all of that. Unfortunately, Delicious lost their distribution through Atlantic right at that time. And so it kind of stopped everything in its tracks. And we wound up having to part ways, and that album has literally been sitting in their vault since '93.
No.
Another part of the story is that I actually I got all the rights to everything back. I got my masters back and my publishing and everything back. And we are going to be releasing this time capsule sometime later this year. So that'll be an interesting look back. But that's what brought me to Los Angeles. And really, I didn't know that I would wind up becoming a composer. But the interesting thing about releasing records, and when I left Delicious, I set up my own label, Super Crucial Recordings and Super Crucial Music, the publishing arm, and I released my own records on my own label. And over time, as I was saying earlier, certain things caught different people's ears. So Vondi had caught, that Far Side remix that I did of the Fish caught his ear. But then other people were licensing some of my songs, my records for their project, and I kind of seamlessly went organically from one thing to another.
Right.
Boiler Room giving me my first opportunity to show my skills as a composer.
So that journey began, as we were just saying. So what are your thoughts on these places you've been around, the people that you've worked with in this, film business, as we say?
Well, I always have a very, I would say just a really strong connection to the people that I work with. We tend to be very, because I really feel it's my job to be shoulder to shoulder with my creative, not to be sort of on some rarefied, platform away from everybody. I'm very tactile.
Nice.
And so I think that has really, it's created very long-standing and really valuable friendships, as well as us being colleagues. Even people that I met first and foremost as a colleague, and as someone as a professional relationship. Many have blossomed into more than that, which is wonderful. And some of these relationships, where you were asking me specifically a minute ago about working with women of color and underrepresented voices is really important to me. Over the years, I've gone out of my way to score things like short films, and sometimes I produce as well. I produce and compose and mentor a lot of, and I have done for a lot of different women along the way. And I really love doing that. I think it's important to give back, to pay things forward. And so...
and who doesn't need that every now and then?
Everybody needs that.
That is very important. It's
little bit of that love. And, and this comes up, again, also in terms of the writers and what they talk about in terms of bringing up writers through the system so that they can learn from a showrunner on a show, and then at some point they will be able to gain enough experience to showrun their own shows.
Right.
It's there's a lot of talk, especially because of the strike, about that, and I also do develop for film and TV, so I have experience in understanding the pitching and the development process as well. So and my sympathies are completely with the writers as they are striking now, and completely with them.
Well, it's great that they have a union, somewhere that's a strong place where it's protecting them a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because this is a big moment in time for our industry. And of course, the writers have been striking now for more than 20 days. SAG-AFTRA are now looking to, get the approval of our union to see if we're going to strike. And I am a member of SAG-AFTRA, and I believe it will happen, and I believe it needs to happen. There's so many things that are changing in the world and in our industry, and streaming, of course, is a tremendous, has been incredibly disruptive in a great way and also in a concerning way. And so I think now really is the time for the writers to be compensated properly for the work that they do, and for that to also impact everyone across the board in the industry. I mean, the difference being that composers have no union. So we are also, everybody's been impacted. We are just as impacted as the writers are by those royalties that are, minimal from streaming compared to what cable and certainly what network has paid, for royalties. So it's that's a big part of all of the things that need to be discussed and looked at.
It's interesting how you mentioned streaming and how it's impacted writers and actors, and it's also, I guess, important why composers have licenses for their music.
Well, they can, but it depends. So, for instance, if I'm working on an independent project, and the budget will never be what it could be if I'm hired by a studio to score one of their projects. And the studios generally buy out the writer, the composer's publishing and writer, and you keep your writer's share, but they publish you. So in those cases, you don't own your publishing, and that's just the way it's been historically. On independence, I tend to make the deals in which I will own the masters and the publishing and give in perpetuity rights for the synchronization usage, so that the filmmaker can do whatever they want with their project forever in perpetuity. But I will still own those, the actual physical recording. The masters are the physical recording, and the publishing is the writing part of the piece. So it's so when I work on independence and I license that music to the production, that's a different scenario, and it's not typical, but there are composers who do that.
Got it.
And it's a great way to be able to work on independent projects where the budgets are not huge, but at least it's a more equitable way to do business. And again, everything that we're talking about in the world right now is about a more equitable way for creators to earn a living and to build assets of their own. And there's a lot of talk, and we've talked about this many times in New Hollywood about, greenlighting yourself and finding ways to make your own creation so that you can have ownership of your product. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but it would be a better scenario, especially for creators of TV series that go out worldwide and make millions and millions of dollars, for them to be able to participate at a greater level and maybe with a piece of ownership. It would be more of the right thing to do, but I'm not saying that the business isn't about doing the right thing. The business is about the business. However,
and a lot of it has to come together. They're sitting on boards right now, debating and discussing things and how it needs to be more of a fair play for everybody.
Yes.
And with composing being, for film in Hollywood being something that's important to a lot of composers out there, I'd imagine.
Well, I mean, it should be more important to the studios and the producers and directors who hire composers to consider the squeeze that there's been and this sort of downward pressure on budgets for composers and for music in general. It's it's been hard on everybody. It's not just the writers who have been sort of suffering, especially since streaming came along, but composers do as well. So there are definitely. My hope would be that what comes out of this strike will be beneficial to all of the creators across the board.
So, I mean, it might not be totally accurate what I'm about to say, so I'm just going to jump right in. But
Okay.
no, would you say budget is a problem in how we determine why post-production, namely scores and other types, where producers might see an opportunity to use a portion of that post-production budget in other areas?
Oh, that's been happening just forever.
Okay.
The notion that while, yes, as production gets going and there are problems or there are reshoots that need to be done or things that crop up, often they will dip into the post-production budget to grab that money. And, so the music budget is usually one of the first ones that gets impacted by that. That's just unfortunately the way it goes.
But a budget for music is so important, though. It's just I don't know what a film would be without music.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I absolutely hear you, and it kind of brings us to another thing that you and I kind of talked about earlier, that the notion of AI and whether it's going to be helpful, beneficial, or a hindrance to all of us. And this doesn't just apply, of course, to entertainment. It really is a worldwide discussion. It's going to impact everyone in the world, in every sector, in every industry. So, there has been this sort of move to, especially in reality TV, let's say, as an example, to use libraries, music libraries. So let's say a composer just puts, or it could be multiple composers, put a whole bunch of music that they've just written simply to just put into a library so that it can be licensed for film and TV. And reality TV has been taking music from these libraries, licensing these pieces for a long time. So there's really no composer on board. It's just a bunch of different random pieces of music, could be by multiple different composers, and used in a particular way. Whereas, for a narrative feature or any kind of narrative television, it requires something different and something much more tailored and customized. And but the notion that it can be done so much cheaper this way has sort of infected everybody. Like, oh, we can do it cheaper, then maybe we don't really even need a composer. And now, of course, the next jump is, well, we can use AI to just create the music. And so there's just as the actors are concerned about the appropriation of their image and their voice and the essence of who they are, and writers are concerned about, what AI how that can impact them. Composers also have to be concerned about it, because not every studio or producer values the score enough to want to make sure that they actually pay someone to do the work that needs to be done. And so it's an odd thing, because I think everyone in the industry who's working in the industry understands how important score is, and that if it's not right, it could kill a project. It could kill a great performance.
Right. And the AI expansion exists in a lot of creative fields, though. I mean, it's more than probably you can keep up with. And
Absolutely.
many types
and
of
right
samples.
Yeah. So sorry. Go ahead.
No, there are many types of samples of that type of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what is it? And what is AI in the music industry? I mean, you're just explaining that, and it's just, man, that's quite a bit.
Well, I was pitched AI for composing years ago,
Okay.
and I was just like, my first thought as a Brooklynite was, get out of here, no way.
Okay.
But I mean, the truth is that it's there. I would, not in a million years would I use AI to write my music. I don't look at this again. I don't look at this as commerce. It's a business, sure, but it's art. And the reason why I do it is because I really love the process. I love the process of actually, working closely with my directors and my producers, being able to ascertain what it is they're hoping I can bring to their project, even when they can't really fully articulate it, and to be able to really deliver on something that is, I'm a big part of the actual end product. It's there's something just incredibly satisfying and beautiful about it. I really love it.
And I feel our listeners are getting a little bit of a grasp of what it is your feelings are about film scoring, as opposed to music created by a person that, I don't know, is thinking like a computer, or is a computer thinking like the person, vice versa, and making this music, with without having to think about it so much.
Well, there's definitely like a painting by numbers type of composer, and unfortunately, that's been sort of, I think, cultivated by the way in which the industry works. So, often composers are asked to like emulate there's a temp score. The picture editor will temp the project with a bunch of music so that it can be watched and by the creatives, by all of the producers involved before they even get to a composer. They need to be able to figure out if the cut is working, and sometimes most of the time having music in there really helps them figure out if the whole thing is working.
Gotcha.
as they're still editing. So when a composer is then brought in, it's their job to replace all of that temporary, what we call temp score, and that temp music can come from anywhere. And sometimes, if they've been living with the project for a really long time, the creatives get very attached to particular pieces of music, and so there's a lot of pressure on composers to emulate those pieces.
Right. So, I mean, would it be something that you would consider, to do or plan to do in the future?
I'm not a big emulator. That's not what I do.
No,
but I
okay.
know how. I know how to listen to something, understand what it is about it that my colleagues are excited by, and sometimes it's just like a particular piece of instrumentation. Sometimes it's the pacing of a piece of music, and not even the instrumentation. Sometimes it's stylistically completely wrong, but there's a piano in it, and they want piano. It could be any number of things. But sometimes they just love the whole piece, and I've been very skillfully able to not emulate what's there and find another way to do it, so that it is unique to the project I'm working on.
Okay.
And so when you talk about, thinking like a machine, that's an interesting concept, because I think, when we're told to paint by numbers, we are being asked to think like a machine. We're not being pushed to be that creative. And there are so many different ways that we can actually approach that creative process.
Well, I just can't see it sounding the same as a person doing it. I have to agree with the way your feelings are about making music and understanding and loving that process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very yeah, it's a very unique thing. I mean, because I also write music and without picture. When I make records, I'm just writing songs. There's no other exterior kind of external stimulus that I need to do that. It's just coming straight out of my head, and I'm writing it, and it's very different from what I do for my film and TV projects, of course, because again, I'm in all these different worlds with the score. Every single one is pulling me into a different world, a different story, and the tone and the flavor of it is really, each one is unique. So yeah, there's that.
So how do you categorize your music?
Well, the interesting thing is that my records are an amalgamation of many genres. So I was back in the 90s when I started. Acid jazz was getting to be quite big in the UK, and that's those flavors of like jazz and hip hop and soul and funk and reggae were all things that I was blending irreverently in my own way.
Nice.
And so there are all of these wonderfully flavorful things in my music on all those records that I've made over time. And so there isn't one single genre, I could say, although I am like an early pioneer of trip hop. I've recorded with and involved some hip hop luminaries like Slim Kid Trey of the Far Side. We go back to when we were both signed to Delicious Vinyl back in the 90s. We've recorded together many times. I've produced a bunch of songs, some for him and some where he is guesting on my material. We have a song out right now called How It Goes Down. It's a remix that I did of one of my 60 Channels tracks.
Yep.
And so, there was always an element of hip hop and rap and getting rappers in to do things with me. I've worked with Bay Area rapper Mystic and helped her get her deal. She's an amazing lyricist, poet, singer. She's just an incredible writer and an incredible performer and artist. And we also, I've recorded with her. I've produced for her, and she has guested on my songs. We licensed the song Destiny Complete to the film Boiler Room when I was scoring the film. And she continues to be recording to this day. And again, all of these things have different flavors. Like How It Goes Down has got a really kind of anthemic, heavy, almost like a little bit of an industrial feel to it, which is different from Destiny Complete, which is just, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's just a down-tempo hip-hop track with Mystic singing and rhyming. So I've got two versions of it.
Nice.
And another more current track called Words Like Daggers that I released in 2020, and just right at the height of COVID, and that features an amazing vocalist, Jaleesa, who you might know her from her big hit that she had called Friendly Pressure. She's just an incredible vocalist and artist and producer in her own right. And we've managed to somehow make a video for this film, for this single, right smack in the middle of COVID, with Jaleesa in Atlanta and me in Los Angeles, and the award-winning film director Mark Pellington directed this video. So that was like the big gift of 2020, when everything was just so bleak and so scary, really, in the world, that I was encouraged to do this, and it was an incredible collaboration of myself and Jaleesa and Mark Pellington. It's really, really cool.
So,
And it's, again, that has its own cinematic kind of flavor to it, very enigmatic and very evocative, and yeah.
very nice. So, would you like to talk about your recent projects and how they're important to what your work,
Yeah. Sorry.
represents to the people that you work with today?
Sure. I mean, I've mentioned The Kill Floor with Carlos Avila, who is a wonderful human being and a wonderful writer-director. He directed the film Price of Glory with Jimmy Smits, and I met him actually as he was coming off of that film, and it was a New Line film as well. So I had worked on Boiler Room. He had worked on, he had directed Price of Glory, and then when he did a short film for PBS called Junkyard Saints, and he asked me to score that. And ever since then, we've done. I just did my third project with him called The Kill Floor.
Very nice.
And I'm really happy to see him out there with this project that's getting a lot of love. It's won Best Short, Drama Short at 2 festivals already, and it's going strong, which is fantastic. And of course, Confessions with Yvette Vargas, writer-director, where I just believe I believe in her, and I believe in this project so much. It's absolutely a no-brainer for a series,
Right.
and I believe that once the strike has resolved, that we will be able to get it sold and made, and that's really exciting to me for her and for all of us involved. I'm also a producer on the short film, and have worked very, very closely with Yvette on it. The film I most recently finished, that will be hitting Showtime in the coming months, is a Bassett Vance production. So it's Angela Bassett and Courtney B. Vance. It's their production company through their deal with Paramount. And this one is the 5th project I've done with director Manoj Huda. He specifically for this, and I'll give you a little background on it because it's interesting. The film is based on an actual bank heist that took place in Chicago in 1988.
So that's why they called it Heist 88?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And the cool thing about the way that they've written this, Dwayne Johnson Cochran is the writer and producer. Dwayne covered a story. He covered the actual bank heist, and he was very familiar with this story. And he did something really interesting with this based on the actual original bank heist, where because it is set in Chicago, and so this is Chicago '88. This is the height of the Chicago house music scene.
Okay.
And so one of the characters is a DJ, and he owns a house music label, and he gets pulled into doing this because he needs money to fund the label.
Right.
And the person who is the antagonist, who has put this whole scheme together, is played by Courtney B. Vance, and he is playing a character who is really very adept at convincing people, even non-criminals, to do something this serious. And so it's a great young cast in this movie. I'm really excited for people to see them and everybody in it. And it's and so when I started discussing it with Manoj, the director, he said, "Listen, I really want you to try to pull in as many synthetic sounds from the 80s as you possibly can." And I said, do you want anything traditional at all in there? He's like, as little as possible and none if you can do it, if you can pull that off. So this was another interesting one in which, we're really playing into the world so that the score is absolutely of the time and of the world of the story and the characters. So it was
So,
really fun.
so this film is going to be going to Showtime then. With can you talk about the actors again?
Yes, and in fact, I need to just let me have a quick look and remind myself. I want to actually name check them because they're so wonderful, and they really ought to be, you know,
I know Angela
spoken
Bassett
about.
was one that you mentioned, and then
Well,
there was a couple of
well,
others. But this was something that was important to them, something that they thought that was important to do, and that's you have to have a passion, I guess, for this stuff if you're going to be able to do it.
absolutely, no question. Yeah, well, this is an important one for Angela Bassett and Courtney B. Vance because together, this is their production company that has produced this film.
Got it.
So it's their baby, which is great, and I think it's going to really resonate with people, which is wonderful.
Very
But
nice.
I mean, some of the other cast are really worth a mention. Angela's not in the film; she is a producer.
Oh, okay.
But Keith David, who is an amazing actor, has been around and is wonderful. Keisha Sharp, Xavier Clyde, Bentley Green, Rebecca Spence, Precious Way, all really did it. Niken Robinson did a fantastic job. Really, I think people will really appreciate the performances that they gave.
So your work in film is something that you focus on at the moment, and that's what you want to move forward in doing. Would you like to talk about it?
It's my main focus, and it has been for many years. Less so releasing records, but I still do currently release records, and so that's still part of what I do. But my greater focus is on developing projects for film and TV, as well as scoring, and that's really like right now. For instance, I'm working on two different documentaries. One I'm producing and scoring, the other one I'm just scoring. And these are also projects that I really believe in terms of the message or and also the filmmakers involved. One of them is about dancers. It's all male dancers, contemporary modern dancers, and choreographers.
Nice.
And it's a really beautiful look at the artistry and what dance has meant to each of these men throughout their lives, not from the time that they were children all the way through to their professional careers. And it's incredibly emotional and beautiful. Actually, it's really for any artist, we can all relate to each other in this way, and I that's why I love that project. And we're almost ready to mix the film at this point, so we're really close.
Well,
done.
Well, you're you're going from place to place, from records to film to wherever, and you're doing a very good job of that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Well, there is that kind of. I mean, like from a business standpoint, they're both very different, and in terms of what you need to do and what you need to concentrate on and how to promote and all the things that you need to do for the records is so different. But when it comes to the film, it is a whole different ballgame. And then it's a matter of if it's an independent like these documentaries I'm working on, they need to go to festivals and they need to just get out into the world and find their way either to to getting distribution at some point or not, but hopefully yes, they will.
Well, distribution parties and things of that nature are the way to go, I guess, with those things. It's it is very talented music that we're listening to about with our speaker today, the Angel, and quite a few things that she's done. Gridlock, you name it. British film, being from Brooklyn and Los Angeles, quite a bit. So I wanted to thank you very much again for your time today and talking with us and hearing your story, and your journey getting where you need to be in music composition for film and records.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And, I just hope that when we next speak, that we will be through this writer's strike and that the writers will get what they need and that every creative gets what they need so that we can get back to work and make some incredible art together.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for joining us today, and you have a very nice day. Very nice talking with you.
Thank you. Same here, Daryl. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again.
We can't be everything to everyone, or can we? The station that leaves no listener behind, KCAA.
Rice Fire Protection reminds listeners that more and more veterans will be returning home over the next few years, and many are local. These heroes have elite military training and valuable professional skills. They also need jobs too. That's why Rice Fire Protection is encouraging all local businesses. Let's make it the year we hire smart and hire vets. That's a message from Rice Fire Protection at 24300 Vera Lane in Moreno Valley. For top quality service at prices you can afford, call 951-243-6677. That's 951-243-6677 for Rice Fire Protection.
Hey y'all, it's Mickey. Join me every